Good morning, everybody. It's 5 in the morning where I'm at. I don't know what time it is by you guys, but it's 5 in the morning. Woke up pretty early. I woke up around minutes to 4. Um, I want to talk to you guys about something. I've heard boxers say this, and it's true. They say, "I'm willing to die in that ring. I'm willing to die in that ring." You got to understand, a boxer's mentality is a warrior's mentality. It's a gladiator's mentality. And there's actually honor for these gladiators in dying in battle. You got to understand, boxing simulates an ancient theme. Back in the days, warriors used to play, it was called. That is, there was no major war, but they would fight to the death in a game. This ancient tradition has passed all the way down to the present time. Okay? If you listen to boxers talk, they're going to talk about kill or be killed to the death. You hear all boxers say that. And literally, boxers lay their lives on the line when they go into that ring, understanding the seriousness of it, knowing that they may not come back out. This is boxing. It's what it is. It's boxing. Now, some of you fans like blood, guts, and gore, but you're disconnected from the actual what it feels like. There's a big disconnect between, for the boxing fan, the gore and the violence that you see and the actual impact of that violence. So when Patrick Day died, a lot of you guys got traumatized by it. The whole boxing community was sad. But in fact, when you think about it, this man died on his shield. It's honorable. In the ancient times, that's what a warrior do. They go to the death. And it's actually something that you can praise Patrick Day for because he died doing what he wanted to do. He died doing what he loved. He died being a warrior. Imagine this man without the outlet of boxing in society. He knew that there was an aspect of himself that needed this. He needed to express this aspect of himself. Just imagine, highly educated guy, but very violent. Boxing creates an outlet for people who, some people say people with, behavioral disorders and stuff, but listen. It's an outlet for people. Sometimes people don't have those sort of behavioral disorders. You know, sometimes the people like Patrick Day was a well acclimatized, very nice person, but there was an aspect of him. There was a dimension of him that needed to fight. There was a warrior aspect of him, and he was allowed to express that to the highest level in boxing, in pro boxing. And we need to celebrate his life. Not only feel sad about the tragedy that happened, but understand also from his perspective that if he ever had to go out, he had to go out doing something he loved. And that's a great way to go out. Now you weren't receiving the punches he was receiving because none of us out here are warriors like those guys. All right? He was overcome by certain punches that he just could not recover from. But if he could have recovered, and even if he could just limp on one leg, Patrick Day would have kept it going. And that brings a little joy in my heart because a lot of these boxers, you short circuit them. What I mean by that is they get hit in the head or they get hit in the body and they're crippled and the system starts to shut down. So they're dying. But even in that moment when they are dying and they're fading out of the game, their minds are still programmed to think, I want to get this guy. I got to win this fight. I'm going to get this guy. So in their heads, you know, they're still on go. you know? I'm going to say this, though, that, you know, that gives me more respect for the sport. Not just the dangerous aspect of it, but the appealing part of it, the character of the individuals that go into this sport. That's what we really admire. We admire the fact that these guys are so zoned in to what they're doing. They're willing to give their lives to get it done. And we see, they call it heart. We see them rise up once they can. Unless you short circuit them, like I said before, like Patrick Day got short circuited, they will keep coming. And it's amazing. And it reminds me of the mentality of some military people and law enforcement, the determination, the persistence, the perseverance, the preparation. And those are the things that really I admire about boxing. This is why I want to box. Now, I'm a much older guy, so I could get much more damage. So the things I'll need to do, precautions I still have to take would be to check my health. I'll have to get brain scanned, all these kinds of things. Because I don't want to go in there and die. I'm a little different to the other guys. I don't want to just give my life, go all out and give my life, well, I'm trying to take the precautions for that not to happen. But if it happens, it happens. I mean, it is what it is. Like Floyd Mayweather would always say. I quote Floyd a lot. He's not the only person to say these things, but he says, what will be, will be. Go in there, what it do, what it do. In other words, I prepared my ass off. I don't know what's going to exactly happen. I can't guarantee nothing. But it's going to be what it's going to be. Let's get it on. And that's an interesting mindset, but that's how it is. Floyd always talk about warriors, and a lot of people criticize Floyd. You're not a warrior. You're a runner. You're this. You're that. The man was a warrior, and they are all warriors. But people fight their fights differently. All right. Some guys literally run when trouble comes. They literally run, and they run around the ring, and if you have to catch them, right? Other guys, they mix it up. When you don't want them to attack you, they attack you. When you want to engage with them, they don't engage with you. When you want to, go get them, you want to go get them, they come get you, and all this kinds of stuff, right? It's just strategies, war, the art of war. And other guys, they just go toe to toe. They just duke it out. Some of them have defense, some of them don't. At the end of the day, though, I wanted to do this video in tribute to Patrick Day, because he did what he loved. He did what he loved. There was all kinds of other things there for him, but he did what he loved. This was where his passion lay. And that's why he took up professional boxing. And you got to give him a lot of props for that. And that's actually a very positive story. Even Dadashev, he sacrificed everything, left, came to a new place because he did what he loved. He might have got short-circuited and didn't get to complete the mission, but he did what he loved. Buddy Good kind of pull him from the fight because his mind was geared to win. He was a winner. He wanted that win. I love that. I love that. And that's things we can take with us from them. Their legacy, as short as it may seem, is a lot to inspire each individual to push. Go for your dream. Go for whatever you have a passion for. Maybe you don't make it, but you're going to inspire a lot of people on the way. So that's what I got to say to people, because it's a life principle and it's a mentality that these guys have that got them this far. And they had a lot of promise in them, and they got this far because of that. All right. So I just thought I would speak on this aspect of it, because I'm not hearing anybody talking about it. They're talking about how sad it is, how boxing needs to change and all of this stuff, but they're not talking about the mindset of a warrior. The mindset of a warrior. Going to battle, going to war. The preparation is necessary. It's not just a boxing match. It's a war. It's a fight. It's a battle these guys are going into. And Reggie's Progress said the same thing I was saying all the time along. This is something you don't play. This is not something that's a game. You go in there, you may not come back out alive. You may go in there and you may not come back out with all your faculties anymore. All right, it's serious. You don't play boxing. You don't play sparring. You don't play this shit. This is for real. And like I said, it's the only sport. Not even MMA does this. The only sport you can't tap out in boxing. There's no way to tap out in boxing. The only way is if your corner throws in the towel or the ref stops the fight. You, as a boxer, could say, I don't want to continue as well, but they'll be frowned upon heavily. All right? When Roberto Duran said no mask, the whole boxing world went up in an uproar. Because boxers don't do that. Because you are programmed to win. And the goal is to stop your opponent. To kill or be killed, literally. I've listened to a lot of you guys talk about different things you think should stop, like headgear should be removed and should have smaller gloves and so on. Smaller gloves results in harder knuckles. Smaller gloves results in harder knuckles. Bigger gloves are heavier, but smaller gloves means less padding, which means more knuckles. You'll have more deaths because of smaller gloves. But just recently, I was watching a video in Joe Gooson's gym, Dan Gooson's gym, Joe Gooson's gym, where I forgot what his name is. He was showing how you build the muscle in your knuckles, how you build this up. And it's by punching against with less padding, less resistance, so you can build the muscles up in there. For me, as a martial artist, I just punch a wall. But of course, you don't get it to do all the different selection of shots, even though you can change your angle on the wall. But you punch a wall, it builds the muscles between your knuckles so they get stronger. And your knuckles become like sledgehammers. So actually, if you have smaller gloves, there'll be more trauma, acute trauma, that is. So a guy could punch another guy really hard, and the guy now, his head would just rupture. His brain would rupture in his skull because he punches so hard. So it's not necessarily a good thing. And they talk about accumulation punishment also being something, but if you look at Patrick Day, he just got hit with one fucking shot, and that was that. So it's not just I mean, they've done a lot of precautions, but it's just that the guys have gotten bigger and stronger. They've got a lot stronger than they used to be. Buddy McGirt was talking about the weight difference, that some guys have to make weight coming down from such a high level. They may be dehydrated, or some guys, because they put the IVs in after, or some guys just much bigger than other guys, and that weight disparity on fight night is leading to these deaths. I can't really say. What I would say is this. I would say that the more you can check the health of the fighters going into the fight, during the fight, you're monitoring their health. There's always going to be a ringside doctor. That doctor should be specialized to realize the signs and symptoms of a boxer who is suffering from traumatic injury, all right, brain trauma. They should be able to see that, right? With Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, I think some people started seeing it. Floyd could have killed Conor McGregor. He could have killed him in that ring. One punch too many. He obviously, Conor McGregor was concussed since I think he was concussed 2 rounds before. In round 8, he was concussed. Okay? Similarly, and they should do brain scans on these guys. Not just a general medical. They should do brain scans on these guys, particularly for boxers, before and after fights. Also, another thing is during the fight, you need to monitor the fighters. If you're a ringside doctor, you should be paying attention to these fighters all the way through. Because the ringside doctor kind of holds in their hands, they can give advice to the referees and the corners and the people that, hey, this is not going too well. The one thing with the UK, why you don't see so many deaths in the UK, the ref stops the fight. You say prematurely, but it's better premature than not. One punch too late. All right, this kid, Patrick Day, may have died in the next fight because he may have had injuries from previous fights and was accumulating. We don't know. All right. And so, unfortunately, there were probably no medical records. We don't even know if he may have had a bad medical report, but they still went through with the fight. You can't do these things. You can't cut corners in boxing. You're talking about a life. So there's these things. I think if you do more medical checks and you do because people can bypass medicals, yes, but particularly CT scans, brain scans, very important things, because that's the most fragile part. Then you can tell you the fighter got injured in sparring. If you got injured in sparring, now just because you may have a brain bleed or some damage to your brain doesn't necessarily mean it's permanent. So what they can do is they can give you, just like they do with a severe knockout, 3 months, then they do a brain scan again to see if you still have the problems. Sometimes you have scarred brain tissue on the outer part of your brain. So it's all of this stuff you got to factor into and consider when you're talking about boxing. Okay? They need to monitor the fighters a little bit more, because the fighters are not going to take care of themselves. They're not going to do that. When they're in a fight, don't expect a fighter to be saying, some fighters might do that. But other fighters, like Jermall, he said, you know what, this ain't worth it. Some of the other fighters, they think, this ain't worth it. But there's a lot of fighters out there. Like, I remember John Molina. He took a lot of punishment. I don't know what's going to happen to him, but they need to do brain scans on these guys. Don't do brain scans retroactively, like after the fact that these guys' careers are over. You're now doing brain scans. Why not do the brain scans before their fights, during training, before training, all those kinds of things? Because I know that brain scans so far are expensive, but they'll get cheaper. But you got to do these things. You got to monitor them. They're peak performance athletes. First of all, brain scans will actually help these athletes in their performance, because if your brain's fine, then you're going to perform better, right? So this is one of the more important things. But a lot of people, I listen to G Funky, and he's talking about if you got a brain scan and something's wrong with your brain, that means you got to leave boxing. No, you don't have to. It depends on the damage, of course, how extensive the damage is, and if it's permanent or not. But for the most part, brain scans just help us to check and monitor the boxers to see how they're progressing. And you have a baseline, which is what their brain look like, and you use that as a reference. So, it's not like you're talking about brain scans where it's a terminal thing. No, not necessarily. Okay. But if you are on the basis that you can see that a certain area could get ruptured and you can have a hematoma there, well, obviously they're going to pull you out and they're going to monitor the situation over time. Right? That's why some boxers don't get fights, because they have a potential for a hematoma on the outer surface of the brain, because they got damage and they have scar tissue in certain areas, and they can see certain areas are actually doing minor brain bleeds. So you have to understand that this is a serious sport. It's a serious sport like that, and they need to put checks and balances in place like that on the medical side. All right. In terms of fights, the referee and they supposed to be looking out for fighters. I've heard a referee say that they're going to probably do more premature stoppage, what they call premature stoppages. They're going to tend towards that direction for the safety of the fighters. And that might not still not help the fighters, because the accumulation of punishment over time, you see, it's the accumulation of punishment over time and wear and tear on the body. It could happen that the fighter progresses into a fight, and that accumulation of headshots eventually causes a rupture, right? So you could do all those checks and still the fighter could end up still being in trouble. But what you can do to sort out that now is the response time. If you see signs and symptoms, you can catch those things before a rupture, right? Or the rupture happened, but you were able to catch it early enough. And so what happens is that while the brain bleed is happening and the hematoma is starting to form, you guys can start icing that motherfucker down, giving him oxygen, because he'll need the oxygen. Ice him down, give him the oxygen, you get him out of there. So even when the fighter wants to walk or whatever they want to do, you tell them, nah, just go on the stretcher right here, and they just move you out as a precaution real fast. Get you to the hospital, let them brain scan you very quickly, because all of that takes time. And then to make sure that your head is iced down, they need to ice that motherfucker down. Icing stops swelling, right? And then they need to get something that's an anti-inflammatory, right? And they need to maybe get something like a coagulant to try and make the bleeding stop as quickly as possible. So it's those kinds of things you have to think about so that you can nip this motherfucker in the bud as quickly as possible. Then you don't go. You open up the skull. They talk about operating on the brain. They really just remove the skull so that the swelling could continue. So you try to stop the swelling. You try to use a compress. Compress will be something very cold. So you put something very cold on the head. You don't know where it is, so you might have to put the compress, a cold compress, all the way around, a towel or something on the head. That'll affect circulation. But then you can sort of slow the process down. So instead of just putting the person on a stretcher and giving them oxygen just to keep the brain working, right? Keep the cells so they don't die off, right? But then you also want to be able to now have a cold compress, something cold to stop the swelling and to slow down the blood flow. And you gotta be careful. If the athlete has been sitting up, you can't put him to lie down immediately. You have to keep him in a sit up position because the blood flows a certain way. You don't want the blood to rush to the brain by the person dropping low. Because now when the blood rushes to the brain, motherfucker gonna die quicker, right? So you might have to keep him and sit up on an incline. You keep him sit up. You got a cold compress on the head, and you get that motherfucker out of there, and you get him as quickly as possible to the hospital to get brain scanned and checked out and shit. That's what you had to do because, as I said before, you see signs and symptoms of concussive problems. And a lot of fans are going to feel robbed that they didn't see a finishing touch on a certain boxer. It depends, man. And what they need to have is medical history and medical records of each boxer. They need to have it and be monitoring and following that. That's the kind of investment you need to have to really get the health of these boxers on tap. So you always monitor everything. It's a prime athlete, right? So if you have a prime thoroughbred horse, you got to have a history of the horse and all that shit. And that's something the athlete and the trainers or the athlete and the promotional company should be monitoring straight through. And they should have not just a health and physical, a health and what the fuck you call it, um, health and conditioning coach. They need to have the promotional company needs to have their own doctor. They need to have their own doctor there to monitor the act. I think they do, but still, they'll need it to monitor the athlete's health, particularly their health, right? So all of that shit they need to have being done, and then everything would be good. But you need to have them being scanned, especially NMRs, MRIs. Do a lot of MRIs on them. Every 6 months or every 12 months, you do a CT. That's what these athletes need to get monitored as much as possible. And then we're talking in training and out of training. So the athletes need to be monitored like that. Obviously, we need to also have the anti-doping agencies checking them out to make sure they're not cheating. But all of these things need to be put into equation. Some of these guys, they say like I heard Deontay Wilder say something that was a red flag when he said he got so much power he's hurting himself, throwing punches and shit. And I'm asking myself, are you taking something? Which is why that's happening, because the body's always in equilibrium. It's always in homeostasis. So you could throw out your shoulder with a punch for sure, but still at the same time, it sounds like you got so much power that it's kind of beyond your natural body's capacity. And I find that a little bit strange, but it's possible. You're using a technique and using a technique so well that it starts to hurt you. Nonetheless, it sounded like a red flag to me. Eating pretty early this morning. Yeah, so shout out to everybody though out there. We are up and rolling. Jermall Charlo is talking about the possibility of going across to the zone to get fights with Canelo, to get fights with Triple G. I like that talk. It shows he's hungry. So when I hear a fighter start to talk about crossing into networks and shit, that always sounds good. And yeah, of course he has to follow through with it. But Miguel Cotto to get the Mayweather fight, left top rank, right? And he fought on, I think it was HBO. He fought on HBO, but he left top rank to do that. That was nice and early this morning. Where'd it go? Yeah. So, you know, it's always good to hear that. Um, yeah. So, if he stays hungry like that, you got to stay hungry. You can't just be a champion trying to defend your belts. I don't think his matchup with Dennis Hogan, everybody talking about Dennis Hogan, I don't think that matchup is going to be, I don't think it's as competitive as people make it out. First of all, Dennis Hogan, when he faced Jaime Munguia, first of all, was an inexperienced champion. He's a young champion. He did not do certain things, like he didn't use his jab properly. And Hogan fought him at 154. Now, Hogan, you can see he doesn't really have. He be slapping with some of his shots, and even when he hits you with a shot flush, I mean, it don't really do much to you. You know what I'm saying? So just imagine him now being pulled up to 160. This is gonna be his first time at 160 against Jermall Charlo, who got a great jab, a powerful jab. It's a mismatch. Hogan's a good fighter. I mean, Jack Coquet's a better fighter than him. Jack Coquet beat him. Jack Coquet arguably beat Derevyanchenko too. You could argue that, but he's not like he's got good fundamentals, but he's a bit repetitive in how he fights, and I just don't see him lasting at all against Jermall Charlo. He's like a perfect fit for Jermall Charlo. So I think the matchmakers put that together. So therefore, I mean, he's an okay fighter. He's better than Gavaliauskas, you know what I mean? But he got a lot more boxing IQ and smarts and stuff, and he outboxes, and he can fight on the inside a little bit and stuff. But he just, no, man. It's just not, it's so wrong for him to be facing, he going up to 160 to get his ass knocked out. We all know this. He gonna get knocked out pretty quickly too. Jermall's faced much better boxers than him. And, he got okay game, but that's against Jaime Munguia. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's what it is. It's what it is. He can get the bum treatment from Jermall Charlo. That's a mismatch. That is no competition. I dare say it's a shit fight. It's another shit fight. And people hyping up this dude, Dennis Hogan, because of his performance against Munguia, but he gonna get dusted so easy. So easy. And it's a shit fight. It's a mismatch. Jermall Charlo hasn't been facing real names either. Demetrius Andre. They've been just facing these mandatories. So everybody be facing trash. You know what I'm saying? Canelo's probably the best out of them. And Gennady Golovkin just faced Derevyanchenko. It was a good fight. But everybody else just facing mandatories, and it's just trash, man. No disrespect, but it's trash ass fights, man. It's trash ass fights. Anyways, people, I'm out of here. I'm gonna catch y'all guys later. Peace.